Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new malicious compliance content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, "Your contact is almost up. You should maybe start looking for other positions." This isn't my story, but my partner's, Doug. He's given me permission to post. First, a little background story. Doug works for one of the larger banks here in Canada. For someone without post-secondary, he's done incredibly well for himself. He's 28 now and has been working with this bank for about 9 years. He started as a teller and worked his way all the way up to just below a branch manager, but more customer service oriented. The story starts February 2020, right as COVID was starting to snowball here. Doug had worked in a few different branches over the years and is quite personable. When a former colleague told him about a position in the wealth department, he thought it might be good for change. It was also work from a small office downtown, which meant he didn't have to go into a branch every day and deal with customers and employees face to face. He decided to apply. With a good recommendation, he got an interview. How this position works is he essentially would be working directly for two big investment banker types, but there was an office manager, we'll call her Sarah, who he also reported to as well. This office manager trained him, provided support, etc. During the interview, he was told that the base salary for the new position was $10,000 per year less, but there was monthly bonuses paid out that would bring him well over the salary cap for his previous position. Once he accepted, it didn't really sit well with me since he didn't get that in writing. He got along wonderfully with his investment banker bosses. They loved having someone so personable, who also had connections in branch. The divisions were kept pretty church and state, retail, wealth. So it saved a lot of time having Doug around since he could just message friends from retail to get information without having to go through all the typical hoops. He also knew most of the systems already and got all the courses he needed very quickly. Once COVID got bad, offices were shut down. Everyone had to work from home. Since Doug was new, he kind of got shafted. He was one of the last people to get a laptop. You can't use your own. Had one monitor. Regularly got stuck going into the office to mail things. Also, since he was new, he had a lot of questions and needed help regularly. With work from home, that meant Sarah had to put in a lot of effort to answer his questions. She was a miserable woman. She was condescending, took a long time to answer him, or would just say, "Figure it out." It was incredibly frustrating for Doug, especially considering the bonus he was receiving was a fraction of what was promised. He was making considerably less money and was doing a lot more work. After about a year, February 2021 at this point, Doug was doing very well at his position. The investment bankers regularly praised him. They even got him fancy Christmas gifts. The only downside was Sarah. She still was giving Doug a very hard time and just generally was being rude and condescending. When Doug's 1 year rolled around, Sarah had a meeting with him about some issues a client was having. At the end of the meeting, she said, "Since your contract renewal is coming up, you might want to consider keeping your options open and looking for some other positions in other departments." We both knew this was an empty threat since his actual bosses basically needed him at this point. One of them started having some pretty serious health issues, and Doug was a superstar helping him through it while maintaining his book of business. We knew this was just Sarah trying to make him feel small. Even still, Doug was pretty upset after hearing this. He had been putting in 12-hour days, for less money, and was borderline being bullied by Sarah the entire time. So he decided to take her advice. He sent out one application to a different division of the bank. Got a call back the same day. Turns out the lady who runs this division for our province used to work with Doug. She was his branch manager back when he was a teller. With this bank, in order to move to other departments, they touch base with your current boss. They spoke to both of his investment banker bosses and they were taken by total surprise. They called Doug to see why he was quitting since he was doing so well. They had no idea Sarah had promised him more money in the interview and that he took a pay cut to be there. They had no idea Sarah had been treating him the way she had been since they didn't interact with her often. A day or two later he had a Zoom meeting with the investment banker bosses and Sarah. They tried to counter-offer him the same salary, $17,000 more per year, and Sarah changed her tune completely. Tried to backpedal on what she said about looking for other positions. Doug politely declined their offer and accepted the new position, partly because he felt taken advantage of since they were so easily able to give him almost a $20,000 pay raise, but also because he didn't feel secure in the position due to Sarah's remarks. His investment banker bosses still call him regularly, 4 months later, to help with clients. Some of their clients only want to speak with Doug or they need Doug's help with systems he designed to make their lives easier. Now Doug works from home still, makes $17,000 more than he did in the wealth department, and his investment banker bosses pay him a few hundred a week for his freelance work. Oh, and the best of it all is that Sarah took on all of Doug's duties for months while they found his replacement. Doug's investment banker bosses told him their new assistant is someone who worked in the mailroom of the office. He took 3 attempts to pass his exams, and has no idea what he's doing. Next one is titled, "You Got Exactly What You Asked For." I posted this as a comment on another thread and someone said it's a perfect malicious compliance. So, when my dad was about 18 he worked for a gardening center in Chicago and he was closing for the night. Every night my dad's job was to close up and walk the money from the registers to the owner's house. So right before closing a guy came in and pulled a gun out demanding all the money in the register. So my dad, being the only one there, and with a gun in his face opens the register and gives the guy like $60. The dude obviously took the cash and ran off and my dad being the calm guy he is just shook it off and locked up. He still had to go to the owner's house so he did and he explained to the owner that they had been robbed and the owner was all worried and asked how much money they lost and my dad told him that it was about $60. The owner was pretty relieved because obviously he expected to have had more money stolen and so he asked me, "Dad, that's all we made today?" And my dad said, "No. Here's your $3,000. Since my dad's job was to walk the money to the owner's house every night he had already cleared out most of the register and put the money in his jacket pocket, only leaving some extra cash in the register in case someone came in last minute and he needed change. So my dad stood there with a gun pointed at him and $3,000 hidden in his pocket and gave the guy with the gun $60 because he asked for the money in the register. Next one is titled, "Got it into his car just fine." I started working at a local hamburger chain that's popular in my area for having extremely fast service and no interior seating. The drive-through is split to take and receive orders on both sides of the restaurant, with the B side of the building being less popular due to the passenger window being adjacent to the window where you pass off your cash and receive your foodstuffs. When being trained, the manager shadowed me and gave instructions at the B side while the A side was staffed by a couple of longtime employees. My first customer rolls up right after the manager explains the service time. If you don't know, most fast food joints have a clock near the register. After your car rolls up to the window, the clock starts. For each car, the time is recorded, and an average is calculated to show how fast or slow your line is moving. So the manager says that my time limit is 30 seconds. He says to get the food from the prep station, put in 2 napkins, and get it into the customer's car. So the guy orders just a BLT, and the kitchen has it ready before he makes it to the window from the speaker. Even better, he had exact change. So I grabbed his money with one hand and underhand tossed the bag into his car. It landed nicely, with the other hand simultaneously. I very quickly said, "Have a nice day, thank you Kamei again," and slammed the window shut. He looked back at me with a startled expression for a second and I gave him a thumbs up and a huge, maniacal smile, and then he drove off. Honestly, it all happened so fast that he had barely come to a stop. I turned to my manager and pointed at the clock which was flashing 0:06, and asked him if that was fast enough. He said maybe not that fast. Next one is titled, "Post office won't hold my mail without a good reason." I lived in the south side of Pittsburgh 12 years ago. For those that don't know, it's a hard drinking, partying part of town. My roommates and I were having issues with our mail and wanted it held. We didn't know if it was being stolen or not delivered or what. So I guess the mailman took offense the way we described it, thinking we were accusing him of stealing our mail. We weren't. So he told us, "Your mail is being delivered, we're not holding it. We're only doing that if it's considered undeliverable." So I said, "Okay, sorry to bother you," went home, and ripped the mailbox off the front door. Our mail was held until further notice. Last one is entitled, "Friend, Learns to Choose Their Words Carefully." Before we begin, I'd like to say that this story may seem familiar to some others, as I've found out that this kind of incident isn't as uncommon as I first thought. Whilst I personally think that this is unfortunate, it's just how life is sometimes. If some elements seem familiar, I apologize. I'll do my best to differentiate this from other, similar stories. Backstory. I had a friend, who we'll call Josh, which is obviously not his actual name. Josh and I had been friends since we were young. Turns out liking Transformers, wrestling, and Hot Wheels makes it really easy to make friends in elementary school, or primary school for those on the other side of the Atlantic. Josh originally was a pretty good guy, but his parents had issues with one another and eventually split up. His mother remarried, and his stepfather began to spoil Josh rotten. Josh began to become a lot more antagonistic, and we grew distant as the years went on. But I tried to remain friendly with him, hoping he'd eventually see the error of his ways. He went through multiple relationships, all of them ending by his hand, but I was unaware as he only spoon-fed me information and made the other party look like they were in the wrong. The incident. Josh had recently had a breakup with a girl we'll be calling Megan, who I was friendly with before the breakup. Whilst I was worried about Megan due to us being friends, I stupidly decided to check on Josh first. Now, I had let Josh borrow stuff from me, including multiple gaming consoles, clothes, and even a few bits of furniture. I tried to be a good friend, but I didn't know that I was being taken advantage of. We had decided to order some pizza, and Josh had unwittingly ordered from Local Pizza, where Megan worked. Local Pizza doesn't deliver. Josh persuaded me to go and get the pizza. In reality, he basically demanded it, because he was too lazy to drive that way. I decided to bite the bullet, and just drive my way to Local Pizza, and walked inside. Lo and behold, I met with Megan, who was on break at the moment. Megan and I spoke about things, and the topic of Josh came up. It was busy, and our order wasn't even done yet, so I didn't mind stopping to chat, until Megan began to tell me her side of things. It turned out that Josh had been a major jerk to Megan, until Megan's brother, Drake, stepped in and pulled his sister out of the relationship. Drake had been a friend as well, but Josh had fed me lies, so I stopped speaking to Drake. I didn't want to believe Megan at first, until she called Drake, who corroborated her story. It was a lot to swallow. Josh's breakups began to make a lot more sense now, and I felt sick. Was I friends with a horrible person? I asked Megan some questions, and she told me her side of the story, and ended up calling out a lot of Josh's flat-out lies. After the pizza was done, I promised Megan that I'd talk to Josh about this as someone who'd been close to him for years. She thought that, maybe, I'd be able to get through to him. Oh, were we both wrong? I got back to Josh's, and we just spoke about things until I managed to get on the topic of Megan. I mentioned to him that we spoke, and what she said. Big mistake. He got angry, and called Megan a fat, lying witch, and declared that I shouldn't believe her. I told him that Drake corroborated her story, and that I was going through a lot of stress trying to make heads or tails of all of this. Josh, now absolutely livid at me, screams at me. "Shut the duck up. Get the duck out. Do you want to believe that witch? Take your shit and go." I was shocked. I tried to say something, but Josh cut me off. I said, "Get the duck out. Take your shit, and get the duck out of my house. You want to ducking believe her and that stupid brother of hers? Fine. Tell everyone how much of a horrible ducking person I am. Let's see who believes you." Malicious compliances. Yup, You read that right, my dear reader. Compliances. Plural. Now, whilst I'm not a big fan of confrontation, I also despise being yelled at. He wants me to take my stuff and go? So be it. I just give him an, okay, Josh. I'll take my things and go. So, I began to take it all back. Gaming consoles, clothes, and I even grabbed the stand-up mirror I'd let him borrow ages ago. He tried to stop me multiple times, but I simply pushed past him and reiterated his words. He wanted me to shut up, grab my things, and go, so I did. PS2 I let him borrow? Taking that back. GameCube he borrowed so he could play some games he got at a thrift store? That's mine. Taking that home. I took everything that was mine, packed it into my car, and ignored him as he screamed, ranted and raved at me, threatening to call the police. I simply dared him to, as I was only taking back my things. When I left, I called Megan and Drake, and told them what happened. They said they had my back in case things went awry after this. Then, I let them in on the second thing he said. Tell everyone how much of a horrible person he is. Okay, Josh. Bet. Megan, Drake, and I went through our contacts for anyone who knew Josh, and told them what happened. One of these people was Josh's own mother, who was absolutely livid at him, as Josh was living in his home on his mother and stepfather's dime. The fallout. Josh's reputation pretty much collapsed out from under him as evidence came to light, and Josh's various exes, emboldened by Megan and Drake coming out with their stories, began to spread their own stories on what had happened. Josh's friend circle turned on him rather quickly, finding out how much of a jerk he actually was. What made all of this worse for Josh was all of these stories had evidence, such as texts, camera footage, and audio recordings, all of this evidence making it obvious that those Josh hurt weren't lying. Josh's mother and stepfather ended up pulling his sizable allowance due to this, and he couldn't afford his home, and was forced to move back in with them. Josh and I still don't talk anymore, and he had to sell off a lot of his furniture and personal possessions to pay off the debt he'd managed to rack up after his allowance was pulled. I've heard that Josh has changed, and is getting better, but after the crap he put me through, I'd rather be keeping my distance. Thanks for listening.